So by the time you're watching this podcast, you're either getting ready to vote, you are contemplating who to give your vote to. You might be thinking, do I even want to vote? Is it reasonable to vote? Is it an illusion of choice? Can you make a difference, really? The people who you are asking for your votes, how do you vet them? We're going to talk about all this and more straight after this. Okay, welcome back to another episode of Magical Musings. And wow, we're at that time of the year after how many 5 years is it that we have these votes coming in?
2019, I believe.
Yeah, so 5 years. So after 5 years, we find ourselves here once again contemplating about this voting business. Now, some of you, like me, may be having had tried different strategies or different thinking or different views that you might have entertained. Sometimes you might have voted, sometimes you might not have voted. Sometimes you might have just wanted to spoil the ballot paper. Sometimes you might have just wanted to do something to protest. Right now, in 2024, we're at a stage where a lot is happening on the political sphere. And a lot of people have come out in large volumes to make a statement. Tonight, we're discussing the Muslim vote, the community vote, the political landscape, how these roles in Parliament affect or don't affect what we think they might, in terms of having an effect, think they might do or might not do. So without further ado, let's go back to the panel in the room. Okay, the first question. Do we even vote? Because I tell you why I asked that question. And I know these topics and these discussions are somewhat improvised. And we may have touched on this conversation sometimes in the past. I was having a conversation with somebody on LinkedIn, and we were talking about voting and the election day. And I brought up the topic that there is actually a view that it might not be the right thing to do to vote at all, like even from a religious perspective. And they'd never come across that viewpoint before. But here we are. We're going to discuss the voting landscape, the options that we have, the options that we don't have, how effective those options really are. Do we actually put in the effort to go and vote and cast our, vote and give our support to any one candidate? So yeah, going back to the original question, do we even bother? Is it an illusion of choice? Is there something going on that we don't know? What does it actually mean? Bobby, I'm gonna start with you this time because everybody's looking at Bobby.
Anyway. I'm ready to go. Yeah. I've never voted.
Okay.
Not interested in voting.
Okay.
And in particular, after seeing as an adult for the last 15, 20 years, my adult life, the state of democracy in this country, the vilification of Muslims, the endless wars that are going on in the Muslim world, the mayor of London, the Sadiq Khan, you got the other Sajid Javid. We've had some Muslim MPs, and I think when we were growing up as children, there was nothing, right? Then you've seen these kind of characters come into play, and at every hurdle, I think they've just disappointed us, right? And I think
when you say, let me just stop you there for a second. When you say they've disappointed us, how have they disappointed us?
I think we can think of numerous examples. I think if we went around the room, Brother Ibrar would have a reason, Brother Kamil, even yourself will have reasons for why and what you would have expected them to do, but they never. Okay.
So that's the question. That's the question. That's the real question. What were you expecting them to do, and they didn't?
To be honest, this is the point. I think in this democratic system that we're living in today, I think we have to appreciate. Okay, on is it 4th of July or 5th of July? 4th of July isn't it the election date? On that day, you're going to elect an MP, a member of Parliament. he's going to be given certain powers that you don't have. What is that power? We have to understand that first.
Okay.
Yeah. That power that you're giving that candidate is for him to legislate, to make law. We think that we're going to get our guy to go there and he's going to put down on the statute books the laws that you want him to make. But what we have to remember is he's going to have to negotiate that with 600 plus MPs. That's why in this democracy, there's something called the whip. The whip is stronger than your vote.
Okay.
So I think
The whip is stronger than your vote.
So is your point, Bobby, that whenever it came to any vote regarding Muslim issues, whether it was a foreign policy issue, whether it was SRE in schools, they never voted where the community wanted them. They voted along the party lines. Is that what you're trying to say?
And the reason is there's a...
I'm just trying to bail you out here, Bobby.
The point being is, I think, look, by Majid, right?
Did you say by Majid?
By Majid.
He's
Can I
respecting
say,
me because
can I
I'm
say
older
by
than
Majid?
him.
Yeah?
It's because I'm older than you. You're making a point of it now, aren't you? Yeah.
So you just got me distracted now.
That's the whole point.
But I think the point is that, number one, you're giving that power to legislate, and number two, you're expecting something, and your expectation is going to be way off the mark. You'll be disappointed, right? And that was clearly demonstrated October 7th onwards. Every Muslim, I think, has been disappointed at what their councillor did, their mayor did, and their, the MPs did, right? Even though some of them went against the party lines in November's vote, against the ceasefire, they went against Keir Starmer, right? Some of the Labour MPs did put in a revolt, so to speak. But it's insignificant. It did not change the law. So the bottom line is, the process for what we would want would be, I think it will be unpalatable, shall we say, at best, for the Western audience, right? So as an example, we would say as D-Day, right? June the 6th just happened, 80th celebration, That was a celebration of regional powers coming together, united politically, militarily, to get rid of an aggressor. If you are expecting your MP to go to Parliament and say, right, regionally, we want the same thing happen. We want a D-Day, right? You are, he's going to get so much mud slung at him, number one. And number two, he'll never get as far as the Foreign Office to change legislation or even direct a policy. So the way we got to think about it is actually...
That says it all.
I don't want to... go on.
I'm sure there's four of us in this podcast, guys, but if you two want to do today's show, we don't.
This is getting warmed up.
We've legislated against them too.
We don't have a say.
I want to take it back a little bit to what you said. The thing is, though, I think the reason why people are so disappointed whenever it comes to voting is we are expecting some form of representation. And since growing up all my life, all I've ever seen is my dad said, "You got to vote Labour." Why? Because we know someone who looks like us, who's in that. And they said they're standing Bradarina system or this system or that system or whatever kind of other kind of nonsensical system there is. But that's why you vote for this person. No idea why you're voting. No idea what we're going to get out of it. But I think in my mind, it's always simply been an illusion of choice. We are told you get to choose, your vote matters, your opinion counts. Your opinion doesn't count. What counts more is this country is run like a business.
100%.
The ones at the top, they only care. Money is a lot more precious
That's
than
why
blood.
there's a movement called 99%.
What do you mean?
Like 1%.
Oh, the 1%. Yeah, the 1%
yeah,
is against.
99% or against the 1%.
Exactly. But that 1%'s making their money. And like, do you guys remember the whole transgender issue? I'm not sure if we're supposed to bring that up now, but that transgender
You
issue.
can bring it up whenever you want, mate.
Alhamdulillah. But that the LGBTQ, the trans, when I remember when they started saying, and the big argument was, oh, but do you have any idea how many of them are killing themselves and hurting themselves because they're not being validated? And I thought about this argument. I thought that's a terrible argument. Like, as sad as it is, people killing themselves, that's sad. They need therapy. They need something. They need some form of treatment. But so I'm not mocking them. That's not what I'm doing. But the principle of harming yourself, meaning that's some form of proving that you are right. This doesn't make sense. And when it comes to money, money will always win against blood. For example, if I went and stood outside any bank, I went outside Halifax and said, I identify as a millionaire and you've got my millions. Give me my millions, otherwise I'm going to slit my wrist. If I did that, they would most likely let me slit my wrist because buying £2 bottle of bleach is cheaper than giving me my millions. Do you get the point? Like, it's a these lot don't care about Palestinian. They don't care about my vote, nor yours, and like however, saying that, I still think for the people and for everyone who is voting, myself included, once again, not going into the fiqh of it, because the way I see it is the fiqh is there. Go speak to your scholars, wherever you want to find them. Take whichever opinions you want, alhamdulillah, that you are comfortable with. But don't slam someone else for theirs because they're also following another opinion. Let them follow theirs.
That's a valid point. Two things that you mentioned there I think are important. Number one, you mentioned the Palestine word. And I think this is the key reason why a lot of people have been immobilized this year more than any time else, because they want to punish the bigger parties for their inaction when it comes to what's happened over there. Secondly, again, you're right, we're not going to touch on the Islamic jurisprudence or the principles behind the different opinions, but there is that option as well of not voting or following an opinion which says that's not permissible because it's for laws other than Allah's, and that's a scholarly opinion as well. Sheikh Asrar obviously publicly endorsed independence. Sheikh Haytham says it's wajib, it's obligatory to vote
in this situation.
Yes. So I've never, I'm surprised as well, actually, because I didn't think he would take.
I think you phrased it along the lines of, if you don't vote, it's a vote for genocide.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the kind of catch line they use, I think.
Yeah, 100%. So we have obviously different opinions. Question is, where do you stand as a community? Because I think this is the integral question.
I think, sorry, Majid, I think that's an important point. That it's not about your vote; it's about where you're leading the community. Because it's not just about me going. So I wouldn't go anyway, but anyone going and casting their vote on in July, 4th of July. The point being is, I think it needs to be a mature discussion. I think it needs to be a wider discussion for us to learn, and the community, that we're at this point where why are people voting first? It's a very sincere vote where people, they really felt the issue of what was going on in Gaza, and they realized that actually all the political parties, rather than even calling it a genocide and even calling to stop it, they actually supported Israel. And people have this hatred, anger, frustration inside of them that they want to vent. We did the demonstration, they vented it. Social media, subhanallah, people, they vented it. And now for me is a discussion later on, that venting it in that way, is that better than voting? So for me, it comes from a sincere thing. So it's not about beating the people, why are you voting, don't vote. The point being is, where do we want to take the Ummah now with all of this energy, all of this sincere feeling? My strong view is, do not take the Ummah down a path of voting and thinking that you're going to resolve the issue of Palestine by going and voting. Even by getting some representatives, 10 representatives in Parliament, that you are actually going to achieve a voice for the Muslim community or for the people of Palestine. I think that's where the line has got a bit murky.
Yeah, I think I just want to pause you on
Yeah.
that for 1 second, because somebody just sent me something yesterday and it just pointed out exactly what you're saying now. I don't know which party it is. It doesn't say which party it is. It didn't tell me who the candidate is. But the mere fact that on this poster it says, "Your vote can free Palestine."
Mm.
Well, I'll just show this on the camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
In the yellow box it says, "Your vote can free Palestine."
You know, I've got a. Sorry.
I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Can it really?
So 27th of May, yeah, Rafah massacre.
Yeah.
We all remember what happened. The little boy Ahmed al-Najjar, whose head was blown off,
Yeah.
and his father
Yeah.
was holding him,
yeah.
and everyone saw the images, global. You be honest with yourself as a voter, as a Muslim. Will this vote get justice for that boy? Will this vote get justice for his family? And this is not only him, it's the whole of Philistine. You know, in Palestine, the truth is they've already won.
I'm going to be the devil's advocate here. Who says that normally?
The devil.
It's the devil. It's not.
says this is all about-
Piers Quandary Morgan. isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah.
I'm going to be
Piers
the devil's
Quandary.
advocate, right?
I
Someone
think that's
could say-
worse.
yeah, actually, that could be. Somebody said that, okay, well, let's just take that as an example. Will that get justice for them? No, it wouldn't, obviously. But somebody might argue, if we are in Parliament, we can vote for a change for the future. If there's enough of us, we can change or influence policy. How true is that, though?
I think
From a foreign policy level, can MPs? I'm not
You know,
sure
I
they
was
have
reading-
much of an
that's
influence
right.
at all, to be
They-
fair.
I was
They-
reading
they-
something interesting, Bobby, earlier on, just to cut him off there. And looking at, it's like me and we were discussing earlier on that if you're going to enter into something, you've got to understand actually what powers am I going to have?
True.
Because if not, what you're going to end up doing is fooling yourself and fooling others.
Or
That actually-
you might become a part of the system.
That's right. And actually, you'll see people sincerely, Muslim and non-Muslim, going on this journey,
Yeah.
thinking actually we want to represent our community and their voice, which other parties, like Kamal said, Labour for many years haven't. But actually, if we understand the system, even as an MP, you have very little say on legislation, any influence. And that's not me saying it. That's not just Muslims saying it. Earlier on, I was reading, it's an ex-Conservative MP.
He's doing a Dilly Hussein. Not Dilly Hussein, he's doing Mahdi Hassan. It's not me who's saying it.
Please.
Listen to this guy.
Dilly was a better thing. But, is Rory Stewart, an ex-Conservative MP, and he said, actually, if you want a career in politics, you got to toe the party line. And as an MP, if you think you're really going to change anything, the only thing you're really going to be able to change is the dinner lady at your local school. And I think he hit the nail.
After 4 or 5 years.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think he hit the nail on the head because really, if you understand the parliamentary system and how law is made, the MPs is really a circus. The laws are really made by the establishment beforehand, the civil service, and then they're put in front of Parliament
To debate.
just to debate.
Yeah.
And actually, if you don't debate within your party line, the whip comes out. And if you keep doing it, you're kicked out or you're seen as a rebellion.
Yeah.
And even any non-Muslim who's been in the system, who's actually held an independent view and tried to represent the community, this is what they will come out with. And that's why I think Rory Stewart's view was correct.
Because
How you summarised it.
Because most people
Sorry,
who-
Kamal, I
Yeah.
you want to say it.
So
something.
I'll just to
Yeah.
round that off, what Barry was saying, most people who have influence over policy are the donors.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
100%.
So the companies and these donors who obviously that's why they do it. Now, this is where I had a chat with Chris Williamson from Derby, who got kicked out of Labour for some claims of being anti-Semitic when it wasn't anti-Semitic.
That's an interesting point. We'll come back to that.
Yeah, and he was saying the moment you come into politics or you see your role as a career rather than a servant of the public, that's when things start going wrong. You don't stand for right, what's right and what's just. You start, being a part of a corrupt system.
Yeah.
I think it's a shame because basically there's a few problems here. One is the hope thing. I think it gives people false hope. You think that I'm going to vote and that's going to somehow do something. I don't believe it does anything, but I still don't think so. You are right. People are mobilizing, people are coming because this matters to them. They are passionate about this, and that passion is driving them. And they need something to let that out. And it reminds me, do you guys remember that story about the carpenter who was building a mimbar? And he's building, and like the war's going on, and he's just building a mimbar, and they go, what are you doing? And he goes, I'm just building. And he just worked on the mimbar. And then when he finished it was this beautiful mimbar. Loads of people asked for it. And he goes, no, it's not for you. This will be the mimbar for Masjid al-Aqsa. And then they kept, well, we'll pay for it. We want this. We want it in our masjid in Egypt. We want it here, there. No, this is for Masjid al-Aqsa. Then when it was finally conquered, he gave it there. He goes, I'm not Sultan Salahuddin Ayyubi. I can't conquer Philistine, but I can make this mimbar. So I've done what I could do. And the point is, not all of us are Sultan Salahuddin, but we've got to do what we can do. So if we can become the carpenters, do what little you can do. If you can write poetry on it. If you can do great art, do great art. If you can give speeches, do podcasts. Do your little bit. Every little bit does make somewhat of a ripple effect. And I think with most people, at the very least, you can vote. At least people know there is a voice out there. Don't get me wrong. Once again, coming back to what Barry said, we should not put our trust and our hope in this because there's a very good chance we are going to be let down.
Just go back on Carmen. Sorry, Carmen.
Yeah, no, you go.
The one thing for me, then before what really came out of a really bad situation was that actually who's got the voice? And it's a question for us. Do you think after Palestine, what's happened, the people have the voice or the parliament have got the voice? Through social media, for me, it was actually every single person, even if you're a nobody, so-called, you don't have a public voice. Actually, you've got one now. Because of social media, we realize that globally, Muslims and non-Muslims drowned out the lies, the hypocrisy of the Western governments and Israel and its masters.
Yeah.
Why would we want to give that voice back and thinking that the only way we've got a slave mentality of voice again is by going to parliament? We've got the voice.
100%.
And we can drown them out. And we have drowned them out. And the evidence of that was that they couldn't push their false narrative. This time, the public had the voice. And the Muslims and non-Muslims who spoke up in support of Palestine had the control of that voice.
And just to add to that, I'm going to pass on to Bobby after he's been waiting ever so patiently, like the middle child. That's a testament to this, of what you just said. On the Meta platforms, I've been shadow banned. I've had much more success on LinkedIn. And anytime I put anything pro-Palestinian on LinkedIn, most of the people who have come in the comments to defend my post when anybody criticizes what I've said have been non-Muslims. Yes. And it's not a Muslim issue. People try to make it, I think you mentioned that last time in the last podcast. This isn't a Muslim issue. This is a humanity issue. This is an issue which for Muslims has a greater significance because of the holy place in Masjid al-Aqsa. But as in general, this is a human issue. And most people have lost their humanity who don't see that. So, Bobby, you've been rewarded now for your patience.
I'm waiting very patiently.
Right, I'm going to take about 10 minutes.
No, you got 2 minutes, Bobby.
And I'm serious. Okay. No, you're the George Galloway, the head of Workers' Party. He did an interview with Dilly Hussain recently. He made some really interesting observations because he's been a parliamentarian for 30, 40 years on and off. Okay. He made this observation, right, on a side point. He said, look, there were men in the parliament that you would, wait in the corridor just to listen to them. He goes, but now, they're feeble, isn't it? Right? and this is going back to your point about career politicians. Number one, why would we put good people, sincere people who want moral justice, who want the truth, into a place which is, the scandals that have been going on? In the height of the COVID crisis, the pandemic, everyone remembers the health minister, what he did. This is the kind of level. Our MP here from Burton. Yeah?
So is your point that a system that's lost all credibility in the eyes of the people, by us voting, why are you going to go and give it more credibility?
Why?
That's a good point. That's a good point.
This is a discussion out there.
But
Yeah.
even
That's
I
a
think
philosophical point.
But even going back to what
We're getting deep
you
now,
said,
Majid.
These
I've been
guys are
reading.
being like MPs.
You got
here.
your, you
Oi,
got your
listen,
laptop with you today.
They're
Let
Though.
us
becoming
start.
like
There you
MPs, they're
go.
taking-
Even my MacBook's under the table.
You got it open underneath there, haven't you? You're looking at your notes.
No, I think what Barry was saying earlier, though, I've got to disagree with a little bit. The point being that the people have the power. I believe, personally, I'm starting to feel like that's a slogan that we are telling ourselves to feel better. Like we have got some influence. So there's no doubt, I think we've got to go back a little bit. Let's talk about the Palestine. I think Palestine's a good issue and it highlights this quite clearly. The thing is, when we talk about Palestine, a simple question is, how do we get our information about Palestine? You need to do an epistemic kind of check on this. So what we do is, do you listen to someone else's reports on it? Me and you are not there. Because we're not there, we can't see it firsthand. And even if we could, we're looking at it from we're looking at it from one experience. However, looking at it from here, one, you have to admit, you have to accept secondary reports, secondhand reports. So this is an epistemic kind of discussion now, right? So if you are looking at some secondary reports, my understanding of it is this: I ignore anything Israel has to say because they're terrorists. I ignore what Britain has to say because Britain are terrorist sympathizers. I'm talking about the establishment. I ignore anything, a lot of what America, the mainstream media of these countries have to say, because basically America's got their head so far up Israel's backside and Britain's got their head up America's backside. When we were talking about what policies are going to be passed, I don't believe it's the influence of the people's voices. If it was, then maybe something would have been done against the Iraq war.
You see,
That's
Yeah.
the point I was making.
Yeah, that's
So
not
I'm
gonna-
saying now your voice has to be outside of that.
I agree, and this is where now the way that I'm starting to understand a little bit more. This is what's going on, is looking at it from the ground up, and this is the beauty of social media. Is people went before social media, everyone was only a consumer of mainstream media.
right.
Now everyone's also a producer of their own content. So when they're doing that, it's much easier to
They-
see
just
on the
on-
road.
Bobby,
they've
just
done what all MPs do, right? I had 1 minute, and they jump in.
That's right.
What were you saying again, Barry? Like, sorry.
I think we need to just turn his mic off. I think.
He's got middle child syndrome, hasn't he?
That's right.
Like, doesn't
Yeah,
get enough
just go-
attention.
You know, on Ustad's
Go on,
point,
go
Bobby,
on.
just carry on from Ustad's point though. Definitely, when I say people have got the power, that we still don't want to say that the change will come only through the parliament. We won't never influence foreign policy, and that's my point.
Yeah.
You can have 20 MPs in parliament, you're not going to influence the foreign policy. That, and never is that based on, like you said, Ustad, that on any humanitarian value.
Yeah.
It's always based on material value. That's the only value they got.
Anything
Keir
America
Starmer-
says,
That's
Britain's
right.
going to follow.
Keir Starmer was a human rights lawyer. Would we ever think that? Someone's a human rights lawyer, he's enters into the system, and he can't even call that a genocide. He's not even a human, let alone a human rights
Forget
lawyer.
calling it a genocide. He can't. He's actually gone further to say that Israel has a right to defend herself by cutting off water, electricity, and food supplies.
Talking about making legislation, he scuppered the SNP vote.
Yeah,
Remember?
Yeah.
That whole saga that happened.
Yeah.
But going back to this point about George Galloway's interview, he made just one final point. He went up to Rishi Sunak and he tells the story. He goes in the corridors. He went to Rishi Sunak and says, "Why were you so stupid when I won the vote in Rochdale? Why did you come out on Downing Street and say everything about extremism?"
Yeah.
He goes, "I'm not stupid." Richie said, "I'm not stupid. I was very smart. I'll do you a favor." I know girls samjho, yeah, that we need to appreciate this. He says, "Why? I'm giving you the Labour vote. Tories want the Muslims to vote outside of Labour, George Galloway's party. Why? Because their majority would.
Go back to
Wow.
Tories.
Forget Bobby
Actually,
Sarasiani.
But
Do you see my
he took
point?
his time, but he got
No,
the bang.
but do you see my
I'm
point?
glad you
I think
gave
he
me a
needs
chance
another
to
minute
talk.
rest.
We please carry on, Bobby.
Right. So, okay. Then, right, now you hear what else is going on.
Yeah.
Right. If you follow the events, there's a few videos being going around about infighting in the Muslim community over voting. Blackburn in London and some places, right? So, Labour Party guys, these kind of guys. What do you think Labour's doing now? They're trying to break the Muslim vote.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They're making promises amongst their ranks to say, right, we'll give you that mosque extension. You get 10,000 votes from your brotherly.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, when it comes to this is why I do not like this voting thing. Because who's got played here?
Yeah.
The Muslims.
Now, Bobby, take a rest now, and you'll come back with even better point.
Pani
after
please,
5
Sagar.
minutes.
Pani,
Have some
please.
water.
Have some water.
I think one point that Majid, interesting what you and Ustad Kamal raised is that we do need a voice. But actually, what voice do we want to have for Palestine? So one thing you would have realized is globally, anyone who had a bit of humanity and a bit of sense and who understood the history of the situation in Palestine, they would have said, actually, the way the Zionist entity came into being is legitimate. It doesn't have the right to exist. It came, stole someone's land, kicked them out of the houses, murdered them in such an inhumane way that any other government, what happened in Ukraine, the double standard hypocrisy, any other government would have been kicked out by now. We're talking about the Zionist government. So you're going to stand in parliament and say that what's going to happen? You'll have a label of anti-Semitism put on you. What happened with Corbyn? So you can see that certain things are palatable for you to have a voice in parliament. But outside of parliament, on social media, we've gathered a global opinion that this entity doesn't have the right to exist and Palestine needs to be liberated.
But, just to
That is the global voice.
Yeah, no,
Anyone.
you're right.
These
And-
40 babies, all of these things that came out was actually to try to shun that voice down, and they failed. That's what I was trying to say. Ustad.
Yeah,
That
yeah, yeah.
outside of that, who's got the voice?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
For me, do you think now, sorry, Bobby, that like even Alhamdulillah, when Sheikh Israr made the point, it's very clear this is not the solution. Do not think and be fooled this is the solution. So for me, was actually even Keir Starmer, who's going to rally the voice of the Muslims, 5 pillars, Sheikh Israr Rashid, the scholars who recently have spoken out for the
Yeah.
Muslim community, I'm going to put my eggs in their basket. They represent our voice. We can do events. We can mobilize masses. We could do podcasts. This is Rory Stewart. What did he do? He left Parliament. You know what he's doing, Majid? I think he followed his line. He's opened a podcast. up.
Podcast, yeah.
Because now it's so easy to actually be a voice for the truth.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. Let's look at these things and let's mobilize our community and our voices and energy on those things. And recently, the only reason why we've not been able to be played or fooled is because certain scholars, certain independent journalists, like Five Pillars, have represented the Muslim community in a very strong manner. And that's the line for me. And the energy and our resources and our community needs to be taken down, not thinking that on the 4th of July it's going to make any difference.
Can I just come to you, Barry, right? And I'm just going to ask you a question, if you don't mind, yeah? Having a voice, yeah, I totally agree with you, very important. Having a global voice is very important. And I think we've got that. And it's a united and it's grassroots, it's young, it's the Muslim street voice, if you like. How does that change into something significant that saves, like I said, that Ahmed al-Najjar, how does that now give his family or him justice now? Because that's what we want. Because the more, I think, the frustration then becomes is this hope, the prayers, they become almost like wasted. And I know we have sabr, we all appreciate this, but how do we translate that now into something that is on the ground, meaningful, etc.? And I think here, I just want to throw something. I want to throw a curveball in.
He's taken over your show now, Majid. I think he's
That's
new
fine,
host.
man. He's coming out with
minutes,
some,
I speak
he's
for 2
dropping
minutes
some heavy
and
bars
that's it
tonight.
Yeah.
Let him
But
carry
I
on.
want to throw a curveball in.
You've thrown a few. You're going to able to answer any? You're just going to keep throwing curveballs.
But look, right? Who's gonna answer this woman, right? I think she's the devil, right? We talk about the ministers in Israel, but there's a settler. I don't know whether you heard, she's a grandmother, right? Daniela Wise, right? She went to viral a few times during this this war, right? And her statements, listen to them. We will squat, as settlers, we will squat outside the Gaza border, and when it's time, yeah, we're going to move and settle. Okay? Then she says, the Arabs will leave Gaza, she's talking about, yeah, because we will make it like hell. You see, who's going to answer this woman? On a serious note, who will give this answer, right?
See, I feel like what we need is one of them rubber masks of Piers Quandary or someone, and just like, to play devil's advocate properly. But in all honesty, look, this is, I think, the problem, right? That you can see this. You can fully see exactly what's going on. Like, anyone who's got two eyes with them open can see exactly what's going on. But the problem of who we are speaking to or who we want to hear this, they know, but they literally got their fingers in their ears and they're closing their eyes and they go la 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 la, and that's literally it. So you say to them, babies are dying, children are dying, look at this child you're talking about, and they're going to say, I don't see him. And you're like, in front of you? No, I don't know what you're talking about. And literally, that's all they're doing. But they're doing it so well. And this is a tactic. It's a simple tactic, but they're doing it so effectively in the sense that it's a tactic to provoke you, to annoy you, and it's a tactic to... So I'll give you an example. I'm arguing with you on A, right? But instead of him responding to A, he says, I don't know about A, but B is A, C is A, D is A. And I'm like, no, forget all of them. I'm saying A, let's talk about A, let's talk about this. And he's like, yeah, but F is A, but G. And now rather than sticking to A, I'm thinking, I've got a point against F, I've got a point against G, I've got a point. So now I'm so scattered in what I'm talking back about. They're confusing you, and you are left with this disgusting taste in your mouth. Like, I guarantee you, each one of us has watched one of these debates and thought,
cringe.
You are disgusting. Like, I'm gonna be honest with you, the Zionists. When I say Zionists, I'm not talking about Jews. There are Jewish Zionists. There's Muslim Zionists, Christian Zionists, any atheist Zionists. My feeling toward the Zionist lobby right now is, if they were on fire, I wouldn't piss on them.
Did you or anybody watch this debate between there was Mehdi Hassan and Gideon Levy on one side,
Douglas Murray
and lawyer
Natalie
woman,
Natasha, whatever her name was.
That was very interesting. And you could see that
I saw the highlights. Yeah,
the audience was so
one-sided.
pro-Israel.
Yeah.
So pro-Israel. And what did it for me is when Mehdi Hassan actually mentioned, we've come to a stage where an atheist, i.e. Douglas Murray,
is the Jewish champion.
Is the
Something
champion
like that,
for Jewish, not just Jewish rights, but he is telling a Jewish man, Gideon Levy, who lives in Israel, that you've got it wrong, I've got it right.
Yeah.
And here their arguments are so dumb.
And this is the point, Ustad, that I feel that even though they've tried to come about this time and control the narrative, like Saddam Hussein, weapons of mass destruction, they've not been able to fool the people. So Hamas, what's everyone say? Well, actually, do you think this started on October the 7th?
Yeah.
Why was this?
Why are you ignoring October 7th?
That's
Why
right.
are you ignoring October? Why are you ignoring it?
But do you condemn Hamas?
That's right. All of this you can see from a kid on the street. And I realized that actually, you know what, this is just a nonsensical argument, and how you're trying to distract people and justify the attacks that you've been going on. And I think they've not been able to push these lies, and that's because the Muslim independent voice has been so strong. And that was my point, that when you enter into parliament, what happened with Corbyn? He was too pro-Palestinian. His voice wasn't establishment voice. When you're not establishment voice, they'll just pick you up and throw you out.
It's easy to discard you.
That's right. And
That's it.
you have to have a certain voice. So do you think we would stand in parliament and say, well, actually, we do not feel that Israel has the right, the Zionist entity has the right to exist because of the way it was created, because of what it's done? We will never, as a Muslim community, and even as a non-Muslim community, whoever can look at that and say what they've done, we will never accept it. Do you think you're not going to get a label of anti-Semitic put on you because if you have that voice? I think Chris Williamson, correct me if I'm wrong, even though I think he's not going to achieve someone like that anything by going into parliament. There's sincere people like that. I think he was one who says, actually, the state of Israel is illegitimate. Is that right?
I can't remember whether he does say that.
There was one who said that, but I'm saying that's not a palatable view. You got to have the view there's a two-state solution. The Zionist entity
Even though the Zionists
That's
don't
right.
want to accept that.
Yeah.
but
That's right. Yeah. It's not their land.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, for us as Muslims, we say, okay, you know, I'm going to stand in parliament and say, actually, we only believe in a one-state solution. And that's not Zionist control. Actually, it should be the Palestinian whose land it was.
Yeah, interesting.
And where Muslims, Jews, and Christians lived peacefully.
Yeah.
Everyone else is
I
fine.
actually don't mind Israel having a right to exist, just not in Palestine.
Yeah.
Go to Germany.
Yeah.
Honestly,
And not in power.
You get it.
Actually, give like Umar radiallahu anhu, like when the Muslims had control, we will show you all of the Western governments or even Zionists that people of different faiths can live together.
yeah.
What happened at the time? Why do they remember the Umar radiallahu anhu treaty? Why do they remember after that?
Yeah.
Actually,
Salahuddin Ayyubi as
that's
well.
right.
After that, yeah.
Where they lived peacefully. You failed that. You murdered, butchered people, innocent people, and Christians.
Yeah.
Do you think any Western government, you know, for even a lot more less reasons, you went and you invaded countries? Why is this whole thing going on in Ukraine that you're anti-Russia now? If you really had a human, it was based on human rights, then you won't have these double standards. And like Ustad Kamal said, that for them it's always about strategic interests, material gain and benefit. It's never about human value and human life.
You know, on that note, I remember reading somewhere, or I watched a YouTube clip somewhere where they were talking about the Russian and the Ukraine conflict, and they were mentioning how Ukraine actually is in that position where it's got far-right Nazi type groups in Ukraine, which are anti-Russia. Russia's issue wasn't Ukraine itself, but the expansion of NATO. And if Ukraine is accepted as being a part of NATO, then that automatically means by default America and their allies have surrounded Russia, and their presence is around Russia. And for Russia and its own security, it didn't want that situation to happen. It didn't want to be feeling vulnerable when NATO posts and presence.
It's a threat to them.
Yeah, it's a threat to them.
And it's that point that actually, do you think this is even about human lives in Ukraine? Or is it about strategic and political interests?
I know, but if you just take another country, a Muslim country, which is very significant in all of this, Egypt, it's not allowed to think like this. It's on all its borders, 3 borders, it's got Libya, turmoil. It's got Sudan, turmoil, right? It's got this Gaza scenario, Israel, turmoil. In the sea, Mediterranean North Sea, you got British and American ships, right? So you're not allowed to even breathe. So, but there's something stirring. I think there's really something stirring. Do you know this hashtag, Stand for Palestine, Free Palestine? Like you said, the Ummah has taken this on board. But I think one thing that we've got to realize, this year, I remember in December of this year, there was articles being published that this year, 2024, is the year of elections.
Yeah,
right? Can you remember? Yeah. And like India's had a vote, the largest kind of,
America's got its votes.
Yeah, so many countries, Mexico,
Elections,
elections, right?
Loads of countries.
So basically, a few billion are going to vote this year. You tell me, anywhere you've read, people are talking about real change through this system now. No. So that's why over the last, in different parts of the world, things are done differently. They might not go through the vote. I'll give you an example. Central Africa, since 2020, has had several revolutions through the ranks of the army to get rid of the corrupt people from the top. And it was with mass support. Fair enough. Some of them were linked with external Russians or whatever. But that method or that way of bringing about a revolution, because what is needed, I think we're all agreed, 1% are looking after democracy, right? They're making the legislation. We're voting for legislation to change, but there's all these hurdles in the way. It's not going to happen, right? The 1% seem to get, since COVID, how much their wealth has increased. I think I was reading 63%.
Yeah, ridiculous amount.
It's a ridiculous amount. And you're thinking, how has that happened?
And I was reading an article too, Bobby, on that point. 6th richest country, Britain, 23% of the people go to food banks.
Food banks. There you go.
And your point on top of that, what you just mentioned, look at the other extreme of the richest
Extremes,
people
yeah. So now
who benefited out in COVID.
But war makes a lot of profit for a lot of people, doesn't it?
Yeah,
So I mean,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
so it's
That's
in
one-
the interest to keep it going.
it
Follow
keeps
the
it going.
money, as they
Yeah.
say.
But
Follow
you
the-
know, can I just come
Yeah, yeah.
just to one point about this
I'm sure
revolution?
you've gone only 2 minutes.
The
but
Yeah,
it's
he's
fine,
revolution
carry
in the
on.
He's
ranks.
actually opening notes on his phone.
That's
as well
right.
now.
Oh my
No, I
God.
know. Do you know what? I've got to read some quotes because they deserve time.
Go on.
if you don't mind.
Go on.
Yeah. Okay. There's some names. Yeah. It would be an honor for me to say. Yeah.
You said you were freestyling this and you weren't preparing. You got notes.
Abdullah Ramadan, the Shaheed. Yeah. Ibrahim Islam Abdul Razak, the Shaheed, and Muhammad Saleh,
Allah
who
give him
the
Jannah,
Shaheed.
inshallah.
Yeah. These were soldiers in the Egyptian army, heard the bombs, heard the screams, they couldn't take it. And in that zone that they monitor around the border, they're not allowed to carry heavy weapons. It's like a demilitarized zone. The only thing they can have is a pistol and a rifle, right? So they did what they could. And recently, this just came out yesterday. I was reading this article, and now there's something stirring. Yeah, and this is what it means for the Ummah to stand for Palestine in a significant way.
I think there's
There
a
was
few
an
discussions.
interview-
Sorry, go on.
there were interviews, yeah, with some soldiers in Egypt, and they've changed their names, so I won't mention, but their ages were true. They're 23, 24 years old. And interestingly, the coups that happened in Central Africa, all of them were middle rank officers below the age of 40. Yeah, so just bear this point in mind. And his quote, it says, "It is painful to know that you can help, but you are shackled and cannot help rescue your people from being slaughtered. We've been watching and hearing how intense the Israeli bombing in Rafah is, and we see dozens of Palestinian families passing by the border. We train day and night and repeat marching chants against the Zionist enemy, and we hear dedicated newsletters bragging about how ready the military is. But when this enemy is killing thousands of our brothers, we sit idle. How come the Shaheed, the martyr Ramadan, was not honored and his name was not mentioned and there were no high ranks at the funeral?" Yeah? This kind of talk that's going on is something stirring.
But you can't do that because military intervention for Ukraine is the solution, but for Palestine it's not.
Yeah. This is the real crime.
But they're different discussions, and I think
Israel
it's a
has-
very important discussion. One is, how do the Muslims get a voice? How do we use the energy of the Muslims, which is at a very good level at the moment? And the other discussion, even which Sheikh Israr Rashid mentioned, I don't think this is the solution, but what is the solution?
The
and
point is, we've
and
got the
Sheikh's
voice,
point was
we-
actually that solution, everyone agrees on it. There's no difference of opinion on that.
Yeah.
When the land is invaded, you've got an illegitimate entity in place. You know, why can't we? And this is what I'm saying. In Parliament, you can stand there and say, for Ukraine, the solution is military intervention. But we can't say that in Parliament.
And this is
for-
why that grandmother
Palestine.
can say what she did.
That's
You know what I mean? She can
But
threaten us.
independently, the world and global view is that. And this is my point.
I just want to bring this back to the main topic at hand because we've only got about 10 minutes left.
What?
Yeah, exactly.
Bob
So-
is taking 40 minutes today.
Yeah, so going
Mute
back to
his
the
mic.
elections, now. Now we're at that stage where people will be casting the votes. In terms of change, if people don't decide to vote, I mean, there are several options people have. I heard somebody say, rather than going out to vote, spoil the ballot paper.
Yes.
Write Free Palestine on the ballot paper and post that into the boxes. Send out a message, anybody, because you're not going to make any significant change by voting in any kind of one MP. Sometimes you might not even get the MP.
But that's just another opinion, isn't
It's
it?
an opinion, it's an
In all
opinion.
fairness, I mean, the way I say it is, you're free to do that. Of course you are. There's
Yeah.
people who are saying, let's do.
Yeah.
I've got friends who've said, they go, nah, I'm just
It's
gonna
not gonna
go in
achieve
there."
anything.
Yeah,
It's
and
not
they,
gonna achieve
they say
anything.
the vote's not going to achieve. This
Yeah.
isn't. But also the way all right, so I think we have to take it back to the Palestine issue a little bit. Is one thing, and I just making notes whilst we were talking. Could you imagine if we were to change some of the words? Because some of the lobbies that are going around, there's a Labour Friends of Israel lobby. Could you imagine if there was a Labour Friends of Hamas, or forget Hamas? Hamas is clearly a taboo word. Labour Friends of Russia party. Could you imagine if something like that existed?
Yeah.
Let's say if there was a party in any group that said Friends of Iran. basically we are told by the country, and there's certain things that are said as a given. I was speaking to a Christian Zionist who said, this lady, and we speak, and I go, yeah, but surely even you've got to admit the atrocities going on in Palestine, that's disgusting. There's like, what, more than 10, 15,000 children have been killed. Children. Think, and honest to God, this person just listened to me, and just said, I must say, well, I do think there are atrocities on both sides.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah? And I was like, after a while, I got annoyed. I go, list one. Just tell me one atrocity that Israel has committed. Go on. And they go, well, there are. And I go, name one. They go, but there are. I go, tell me one, just one.
Can't do it.
You can list for me the other. Now this is some feeble attempt of yours to sound or to make it seem like you're being objective when you've already made up your mind. And this is the problem. Like, we've got a lot of people who are set in their minds, and they see us and they think, well, of course, them lot are going to be against Israel because they're Muslims. And that's not the reason. Like someone go, have you guys heard the argument that some Israeli spokespeople have been saying, where they've said things like, oh, I guess you'd also deny the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm quite blunt about this. If the only source that told me that the Holocaust happened was Israel, wallahi, I wouldn't believe it. They're such big liars. But because other people other independent researchers, historians have looked into it and said this happened, I believe it.
In certain states in the US, it's actually illegal to
deny the Holocaust.
I mean, they made it a law that you can't deny something like that having happened. How? I mean, that kind of is kind of mind-boggling.
But denying Winston Churchill's Bengal famine.
Yeah.
And that's my point,
to debate.
Ustad, and that. How are we going to get a global opinion that to deny that Palestine must be liberated is more than illegal?
Yeah.
I feel that opinion is being generated at the moment.
It is.
In a very good
Because
way.
at the moment,
and that's not by Parliament, that's by outside of Parliament.
Yeah. Because everything, is anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
So,
if you went to Israel tomorrow and it rained on you, or you got food poisoning, it's because you're anti-Semitic against the Jewish food.
Corbyn.
Yeah.
The only way they brought Corbyn into line, well, not into line, but they couldn't then kicked him out was the whole
Semitism. Yeah, and that's it. Like
that was the stick they used.
Everything is anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
You could hate their hairstyles and call it anti-Semitism.
Just rounding it up now. 2 questions I'm going to ask from each of you. Number 1, elections are going to come and go. What next? Elections are going to come and go. This voting season is gonna finish. So whether the candidate that you want in, if you are going to vote, comes in or not, what about after? What does the day after look like? Right? Locally, nationally, there are many independents, and in some areas there's a high chance of some of these independents going in. There are some areas that there is not a high chance of some of these independents getting in. What does the day after look like if we were going to continue? What's the next step forward? And the final question, so it's a 2-part question for each of you. So number 1, what does the next step look like? Number 2, which way are you swayed? Are you? I think for 2 of you, you've made that clear. You're not going to vote anyway. Ustad Kamal, probably the question is more relevant to you and me.
Yeah.
Are we likely to vote? If so, what's going to be the deciding factor and how we cast our vote? So I'll start with you.
So the first part, I think the day after in all honesty, I think we need to give some advice to people. And the advice is what we were speaking about earlier, Barry, that it's a case of strengthening your nafs. Know that you're not doing this for yourself. You're not, even though you basically do what you need to do, but don't put all your eggs in one basket, as they've already said. In the sense that don't be disheartened if it doesn't go your way. Don't give up if it doesn't go your way. Palestine still requires our voices, still requires our support, even afterwards. So that's necessary, and that has to be said unequivocally, that no matter what the situation, let's assume, look, at the moment, George Galloway is he's championing the Palestinian cause, yes? But if George Galloway tomorrow, let's just assume, in fact, I make dua for the guy that Allah guide him and so on and so forth.
I mean,
right? But let's assume he gets bought. and completely switch his side after he comes into power, is that going to damage my iman? It shouldn't damage my iman. It shouldn't damage the trust I have in Allah. Because I feel like a lot of people suffer from this. When things don't go their way, or they don't go in, it seems hopeless. Allah says, "La tahzanu," don't despair, don't lose hope. Right? Hope is one thing we have, and definitely we are partially the hope for the Palestinians. We can't give up just because it doesn't work out. Cool. Secondly, as for voting directly, then most likely I will be voting. Most likely. The only reason being because the way I see it is I could put in my vote and still do everything else that everyone else is asking and saying, what else can you do? So I can do everything else I'm going to do, and this just adds to it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Barry, moving on to you. I know you're not going to vote. That's clear.
Yes.
So within 1 minute, please, what's gonna look like after voting season?
10 seconds. Why I wouldn't vote is I think there's better alternatives in order for us to use our energy. I wouldn't want to give the system any credibility. I feel it's lost all its credibility. As a community, I think we should carry on before this whole election thing started the way we were going. SubhanAllah, all the scholars came together. They did united events up and down the country. We mobilized ourselves on social media. We did demonstrations even locally. I think we've got a lot of professionals, a lot of sincere Muslims and non-Muslims that we should come together and mobilize like we were doing, a voice for our brothers and sisters in Palestine, and be as loud as we were. There's other things. Last 20 seconds. There's a massive non-Muslim community who actually we need to engage with. Before Palestine, who've actually been sold lies. Parliament process is not going to do that for us. Now they've realized what's gone on in Palestine. We need to come together and work with them. We need to engage with them. So this is where, and there's so much more if you gave me more than a minute, but there's so much we need to do. I think we need to get it out of our system, do what we're doing. I don't think it's going to achieve anything, but then focus our energies on the real thing, what is going to bring change and what will give us a solution for Palestine.
Thank you very much. Bobby, he's taken 30 seconds of yours.
Okay, so I've got 10 to 20 seconds. That's fine. There's been a purge, okay, in Labour Party, the left, call of the left wingers, okay. Interestingly, there hasn't been that much of a purge of the Muslim MPs and these things. So I'm just watching the events fold out, but I've got a sneaky feeling they'll let some independent characters come in, pro-Palestinians, into Parliament, 4, 5, whatever the number may be, and either they're going to do one or two things. Either they'll go what Barry mentioned earlier about anti-Semitism and throw that stick at them and then batter us with it, or they might go down the route of actually these guys can champion the two-state solution, which is again not a solution that I would adhere to. It's a solution that's again written in Washington and London, and they'll use us against this. Yeah, so we've got to be careful. What we can do, I agree with Ustad Kamal, does a brilliant job with students. We need to educate our children about Al-Aqsa. Right? Brother Ibrahim, protest. We got to protest. You're on social media, you got to be on social media. We've all got connections in influential families here in UK, in the Muslim world, and we've got to keep on talking and talking and talking until everyone's heart settles that actually we've got the voice and we've actually got the power in our hands as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. Jazakallah khair. Finally, for myself, I think if it was an independent, I would probably be more likely to vote as a protest to parties. Voting for a party is a bigger question mark for me more recently in the last 2 weeks than it has been before, after having looked at a lot of different angles in this. I think if it was an independent, not associated to a party, because when you vote for an individual who's associated to a party, you're voting for the party and the policy and the things that they stand for, and that for me causes some cognitive dissonance. So for that reason, I have that question mark. As for the day after, personally, I think our communities need to unite more on what Barry was saying, and that starts from home. We start from home. We start with our children. We start with the community. We start with our mosques. And I think when you have a united front, you have more leverage in demanding rather than begging.
Yeah.
When you are a recognized body, more formally than not, or you are an identity, collective identity, it gives you more leverage in negotiations, even if you're not directly involved in politics, but with those who are directly involved in politics. So for me, I would say that the unity element is a big element, and that's something we've got to work towards from a community level, which will ripple out if every community did that to a global level.
Sorry, you just mentioned one last thing. I just feel like I have to. I think that's a very important point, building cohesion amongst individuals and things. And the reason why I mentioned the Muslims, that it's got to be, the Muslims shouldn't lose faith anymore. I feel like you are right, Barry. We are the ones who are keeping that voice loud enough and then bringing in the non-Muslims as well. So we've got to be the battery basically for them. That's one thing. Second, the last thing I want to mention is our voices independently, because we're speaking from our own personal podcast, or we're speaking from here, there, people are ignoring them, especially people who have positions. So what I think is quite important is we teach, and this is a long-term process, but we teach our youngsters, the next generations, don't just excel, but excel and reach the highest accolades in every subject that you can. Because if we 20, 30 years from now have the experts in every field, then it won't be as simple as, oh, Elon Musk's switched sides and joined Israel. Why is that a big deal? Well, now we've got 100 Elon Musks. Now and they're all, ours, alhamdulillah, they got better voices. If we have the influence in every department, then an individual's voice has more impact.
Foresight, which we've lacked.
Alhamdulillah. So may Allah make it easy.
Alhamdulillah. I mean, that brings us a close to this particular episode. Thank you for joining us. And don't forget to like, subscribe, share. It does help us get the message out, because we could just be sat here doing this by ourselves and nobody listening. But just a simple thing like liking a post is a form of doing good as well, because you are sharing a message, you liking it, you're contacted to see what you've liked, and that has a ripple effect as well. So without even spending money, you are sharing the good work. So thank you very much for joining us. Share, subscribe with the family, friends, and inshallah we'll see you at the next one. Thank you.